Welcome to A Tale of Two Scribes. I'm your host, Eric P. Bishop. This is a place where interesting people come to talk about their creative outlets. As for myself, I'm an author, podcast host, travel enthusiast, and lover of the outdoors. If you'd like to learn more about my published works or adventures, go to my website, ericpbishop.com. I hope you enjoy the show, and please go out and support today's guest. Thanks, and enjoy the journey. Welcome to another episode of Tale of Two Scribes. So today, I'm glad to have Lauren Ungeldi on. Lauren, how are you?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
I'm doing wonderful. We're getting to talk. It took us a little time to connect, and that's the beauty of technology and the downside of technology that sometimes doesn't work right.
Hey, that happens. That happens.
But no, I'm glad. So we were talking offline, obviously, before we started recording, just to get our ducks in a row. And I think originally I heard your name. You did an interview with Jeff Clark, who's a buddy of mine. And then life happened and everything gets busy. And then I had Jeff Morris on talking about Legion Rising. And I was very curious about the process. And he said, "You need to talk to Lauren." And I was like, "Ooh, ooh, ooh." So took a little
You're
bit to connect, but I'm loving to have a discussion about the other side of writing, which is what you've been doing is listening, which we talked about offline. You have to listen to people and be able to tell their story, which is it's a pretty unique in a way skill set. It's a great skill set to have.
Yeah, I think writing is such an interesting thing. And certainly my journey as a writer has evolved a lot over time. I mean, now I'm working on my book number 13. And I look at where I started and I see my first book right behind you, Legion Rising. I see it right behind you
Got it
there.
there?
And that journey and what it kicked off for me, and how that progressed. But you certainly see yourself change in the process. And to be a collaborative writer, to actually go in and write people's stories. So it is about having a skill set as a writer, but in some ways it's also kind of partly like being an actor or actress because
Mhm.
you have to do an immersion into this person's mind, their psyche. You have to be able to make jokes like them and insinuate and become them. And so when I go deep into a process, I mean, I'm here at my desk, but you could see someone's childhood photos are across my desk all the way through their entire life. There's been some books when I first was writing Jeff's, I got, very immersed in the process. I started to dream in the sequences that I was writing like that. It's this really enmeshment that has to happen if you're going to write in a true and honest and authentic way. And so
Mhm.
my career is interesting in that way. Is like, yes, it's a writer, but it's also about really putting myself in the mind of different characters. And it is fun. It's fun to
Mhm.
be inside different people's minds. I mean, there's some dark corners in there too, but for the most part, it's good. It's real good.
Depends who you choose to write for, I guess.
Bingo.
So let's unpack the first part is um how you got to the spot where you felt comfortable or felt like you wanted to take on the challenge of, not just telling your story, but telling someone else's story. And in some ways, obviously, that's a very delicate thing to do because someone's entrusting you with their life experiences to tell them accurately, of course, but also to kind of get the general vibe, especially if they're not able to articulate it on paper. They can only verbally tell you.
Yeah, I mean, it's a deep responsibility. And I see what I do each time I'm working with someone. It's an honor and a privilege because the thing about books is they will outlive you.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the truth. This is every time I look at a book, I think someone's grandchild will hold this.
Hmm.
This will be the thing. This is their legacy. So it's not just about the past and what has been, it's about encapsulating something. And I take that very seriously. And so I mean, in answer to your question, it was kind of interesting. So I loved writing since I was a little girl.
Hmm.
At like 3 years old, my parents said they would find me and I would just have these spiral bound notebooks. And I was just putting my pen like up and down, up and down, up and down, and filling out pages with just this up and down page after page. And they said, "What are you doing, Lauren?" And I said, "I'm writing my book." And I would have
Hmm.
stacks of these. My parents would buy me the little 10-cent notebooks
Yep.
and I would just go up and down. This is three. So it was in me. I loved it, but when it came time to pick a profession and actually get training and all that kind of stuff, I actually went into wellness, health, and nutrition,
Yep.
opened my own practice that worked on, everything from lifestyle with kind of towards a functional medicine approach kind of thing. And I loved working with people. I loved hearing their stories. And understanding the intersection of mind and body, where, mindset or previous trauma had made an impact on their life choices. And so amazing work, loved doing what I did. So I'm at the height of that. My practice is growing big. And then someone said, hey, there's this guy named Jeff Morris, and he's coming to your town. He's going to do a talk at a local CrossFit gym. And I was like, okay. And they said, we just want to write like a short piece to put on a blog post just to kind of promote the event. It was a Legion 8 event where he's honoring 8 men that died. And some of the wives and moms were going to be there, and just amazing, amazing event.
Yeah.
And so someone said, we know you're a great writer. Just, do you mind just giving your time, hop on the phone with Jeff and let him tell you a story and do it. So I called him up. We talked maybe 45 minutes. I write a blog post. It
Hmm.
gets released, and it was a great event. I met him. Okay, it was great. 2 weeks later, I get a message from Jeff. Hey, have you ever considered writing a book? And I was like, okay, this is interesting. And he's like, I've told my story many times, but in that 45 minutes
Hmm.
that you were on the phone, and then what you wrote afterwards, you wrote things that I didn't tell you but wanted to say. And
Wow.
that's, he said, that's something very new. And so he
Mhm.
said, what would you think about this? And so I'm kind of thinking like, wow, all right, this is a big decision. And can I do this? I knew I was a good writer, but I mean, embarking on a full-length book, as you well know, it's like running a marathon, it's a big deal. So I said, you know what? Let's do it. So by day, I'm doing my business. I'm working with clients. By night, I mean, I've got photos strewn out everywhere. I'm looking at, footage. I mean, there was photos that, of war and the carnage there, and
Yeah.
just trying to do research and everything, interviewing Jeff. And it wasn't just Jeff's story. I mean, I'm also holding the stories of the Legion 8 and
Mhm.
these 8 men, and the thoughts of their families who will read this in every word, how important it was and how
Yeah.
this was memorialized. And so I felt it. I felt a deep sense of responsibility, not only to him, but to those families. But the book did really well. It was very well received. And then
Mhm.
after that, I started getting a steady just referrals, referrals,
Okay.
referrals. Someone wanted me to write a book. Another person wanted me to write a book. And then it kind of comes to this breaking point that it's like, I need to go all in on my writing career.
Right.
And so I end up selling the practice. I end up traveling the world full time. I end up writing. I mean, now I'm on number 13, meeting a lot of very interesting people.
Hmm.
Um, Getting kind of that led me to being involved in the world of global business, and getting to meet a lot of world leaders, and just amazing. But yeah, all started with Jeff Morris and a blog post.
I'll start it. That's funny. It all starts, but I think the thing people can get out of that, especially, is you don't know when things will begin and you don't know how they'll begin. And I think the biggest thing, which you've proven, is you're open to something. And I think so many, and obviously you've met so many people in this world as well, especially from a global standpoint, really from the world you've met, is many people kind of get settled in their lives. And they get comfortable, and there's nothing wrong with comfortable. But if you want to actually exceed in life, if you want to excel, if you want to get better, if you want to grow, at some point you're gonna have to take a chance, and you're gonna have to step out of your comfort zone, and you're gonna have to do something that's challenging, that's taxing. I was actually a car ride yesterday. I have a friend, his father passed away, and so it was about a 4 hour drive. Plus, I had to get a rental car. I didn't want to take my car, so I'd drive to the airport the opposite direction, get a car. So I was in the car 10 hours yesterday. Like, okay,
Oh,
this is the
wow.
perfect time. I can deal with it. It's all a mental thing for me. I just
What's
turn
your
out
MO?
okay.
Like, you podcast or audiobook it, or you just
Audible.
like straight silence? Okay.
Yep. So Audible. So I actually, and I've got like a dozen books on my Audible account. Sometimes I listen to them. Sometimes I go months without like down. So I have all these credits. So I went through a couple weeks ago and I just bought like 10 books. And one of the ones that had already been on there that unfortunately I have to admit I hadn't played was Arnold Schwarzenegger, um,
Oh.
his latest book, Be Useful, or his only book, I guess. Fascinating, and it kind of it helped prepare me for talking to you about writing someone else's story because he read it himself. So he was telling it was 7 tools for being useful, basically, and just kind of breaking down because I think people know his life and they know, they know the governor, they know the celebrity side of it. Well, there's also the side of how did he grow up and his family situation and his father, and speaks very kindly of his father, but also talks about how his father was abusive. So kind of how it made him to be the man that he is. And it's just, again, it's kind of one of those motivational things of you see where people come from and like everything's stacked against you in life. At some point, and then people say, well, you get lucky and this and that. I don't, at some point, you have to do something yourself. What's the statement of luck is where preparation meets opportunity? And I don't think there's luck. I think there's you busted your ass, you did something, you probably fell on your face a lot of times. One of the times worked. And then you took that as kind of a bridge of, okay, how do I go to the next step? And you just keep, and like for yourself, probably you can speak on this is meeting people. You meet one person, that could open up 10 more people. And one of those 10 people says, hey, I've got a story for you, Lauren. Would you be willing to tell my story? And you don't know how that's going to happen, but if you don't put yourself out there, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, one of my favorite quotes is destiny is in love with effort.
Hmm.
And I like that one. It's actually my husband who said it to me. And I love that so much because, we say, oh, it's luck or it's, these things. But if you ever notice the lucky ones, they're the ones that put forth a lot of effort. And
Yeah.
it's interesting because I've gotten to study and work really closely with people who are very successful from all different walks of life, former prime minister, someone from special forces, or someone who's a thought leader. And had this idea of what success was,
Hmm.
that it's like this kind of validating event that takes place. But
Right.
what I realized is that successful people, it's an identity. It's who
Yeah.
they are. They're the kind of person that when opportunity comes, they deliver quality and excellence because that's who they are.
Hmm.
And I think that's, the most important thing. And it's true that if you just say, oh, I don't know about this opportunity, but when you deliver everything you got, work your ass off for every opportunity. And I've seen the most successful people always have that like humility to really see the value in every single opportunity.
Yeah. Well, and I think the people, I think the stat, like for lotto winners, I think the stat is like 80-90% of them are broke within like 5 years. Well, why is that? Well, you go from very possibly being a lower income or not, most rich people don't buy lotto tickets that I'm aware of. It's typically someone that's wanting to get lucky. They want to, get something that they never were able to have in their life, and they get it, and that's really amazing thing, but they're not trained to handle that kind of money because they didn't acquire it in a way that allowed them to know that, hey, you got to balance the budget. Hey, the 10 family members that are coming out and asking for cars, probably not a good idea to say yes. So they blow it. And you kind of hear these stories, and a lot of times people will hear the stories like, man, I wouldn't do that. It's like, yeah, but probably 80% of the people that lost all their money said the same thing. Well, I wouldn't lose my money. It's like, maybe you would. I actually saw the
Well,
billboard.
people focus on like, I want to get the seat at the table. I want to see at the table. How do I get in the room? And I'm like, just focus on being the person that belongs there, that
Right,
that table is meant for you, because it's not just about the opportunity. It's about becoming who you're meant to be and also
right.
unbecoming the things that you need to undo. And so I'm big on identity of success rather than seeing it as this kind of validating event that you're waiting for. Oh, she became successful,
Mhm.
but forging that identity. And, there's a lot of inner work that happens there, but that's the
Yeah.
real stuff.
Well, that successful mindset too, and getting to that point of you realize it's a it's a journey, not a destination. So,
Yep.
in the sense that in my world with do finance by day, but in my world for writing, there's certain milestones that people normally want to hit. They want to be a New York Times bestseller. They want one of their books to be bought by Netflix or one of the big studios and turned into something. But the funny thing is, I know multiple people that have reached those milestones. I haven't reached them yet, but in talking to those people that have, reaching that milestone wasn't like, I've
Mm.
got the ultimate joy now and I can just stop doing this. They realize, okay, that was it. That's what I like poured my life into for 10, 20 years. There's got to be something else. And yeah, the other thing else is to keep growing, is to, okay, you wrote a really great book and it was well received, do it again. Can you grow your audience more? And you kind of, I think your goalposts, get moved each time you achieve a level of success. And you realize that a lot of times that success is not going to give you the joy. It's working towards it. And that's, we're creatures that,
Along the way too. I mean, if it's just this single external validating event you're chasing, it's always anticlimactic,
yeah,
But if you see everything as how does this make me become? How does this forge my character? Then nothing can really be a loss. I mean, everything
right.
is immense amount of potential for doing that.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. But I think that's, and I try to read a lot of books. I read more nonfiction than fiction now, only because I'm trying to learn more. And not that I can't learn anything from fiction, but that's kind of what I write in. So, yes, I have a lot more to still learn about how to write fiction. I will until I write my last book, still need to get better at it. But it's more of what's the other stuff I can learn that can help me with the fiction or that can help me try to grow my business that I have or the podcast world or whatever. And it's that oh, and I tell it to my kids, is you're always working towards it. You're all, my son plays guitar and he's learning that now. He's graduates in a couple months, looking to go to college. He's got a really great tutor right now that's teaching him. And I talked to him on the car ride yesterday. I was driving. I was like, "How was your lesson today?" And he was so excited. He was breaking it down. He said, "We're gonna have another one next week." And again, it's one of those things where you have that lesson, you feel like, "Oh, I learned a new chord or I've learned a progression on something." But there's another thing to learn next week. There's always another thing to learn.
Always, always. And that's why that curiosity, people say, what inspires you to write? How can you keep writing? I'm like, it's life. It's living, when a first time, author comes to me and says, how do you do this or that? I'm like, get out there, live, go somewhere you have never been before. Be with people who think nothing like you.
Yeah,
Read a book you agree with, one you disagree with, one you love, one you hate, one you want to throw across the room. Just get out there,
right.
see and experience, and it will stretch the bounds of your creativity. The worst thing for a creative is to get inside an echo chamber or a bubble. The
Yeah.
best thing is to just get out there and then with consistency execute. I like to think of the first part as inspiration, where you see, hear, touch something that inspires you. And then you have to marry that with motivation and discipline. And it kind of goes in a cycle too. I gather inspiration, I go really high, and then I get the motivation to do something. And then I have habits that just keep me really consistent, for the execution portion of it.
I tend to think based on talking to you and just so far what we've discussed is you always, probably from a young age, always had questions, always was asking the questions and always open to listening to what the answers were. And that's one of the like kind of the keys of someone succeeding is not thinking they know everything, understanding and having the humility to realize, man, there's more I don't know than what I do know. So how do I learn more? And whether that's books, whether that's,
Yeah.
nowadays, these things are the devil, but there is the technology side of it that if you want to learn something, there's no excuse. Just, oh, I can't get into college or whatever. YouTube. They have this great thing called YouTube that you could literally watch videos, which is not advisable, but you could watch videos the rest of your life and learn something new from YouTube every day of your life.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's why chronic curiosity is such a key. And
Yeah.
some people are lifelong learners. I love lifelong learners and people who are willing to challenge or stretch my imagination or what I know and understand. And so, yes, you're right. I definitely have a bad case of chronic curiosity.
Are there some things, and I know some of the books you've worked on you can't discuss, but are there some people that you've met in this journey so far that you you got something out of the conversations that you didn't expect? Like kind of like a nugget of something like you never saw something a certain way. It's like, oh, and maybe it's a way that they were able to succeed is a mindset that you hadn't thought about before. But has there been something that's kind of stood out that's realized that that's how that progression happened for that person?
I mean, there's one story in particular, Bibi Aisha. She is a young Afghan girl on the cover of the 2010 edition of Time magazine. And she was sold to a Taliban leader, became a child bride at 13 years old, and she every night would plot her escape out of the compound. And she would get her things and she would run as far as she could, but women couldn't travel alone. She didn't know where she was. There was no way to get a bus ticket, anything. And so she just kept plotting and kept planning. And one day she takes eggs, and the eggs end up being traded for a bus ticket that she uses to escape. And unfortunately, they found her and brought her back. And that's when they ultimately mutilated her in punishment, which is, how we remember that very iconic photo.
Yeah.
But I think it just, that element of resilience and what we are capable of as humans.
Yeah.
And there's that scene right after the mutilation takes place, and she's laying near the ground, and she no longer has a nose or ears. And it just, you want to give up at that moment. You want to say, I'm done. you know? But she, the girl stands up and she's like, I'm getting down this mountain. And the sheer grit to survive is amazing. And so I really, I would say through that, that's one perspective. And then
Hmm.
there's a book I just finished with a former Delta Force. His name is Tyler Gray.
Hmm.
And we're talking a lot about, those who grow up in a chaotic environment and then are forged in chaos. Forged in Chaos is the name of the book, by the way.
Yeah.
And it deals a lot with the environmental conditionings and the adaptation that takes place when you're forged in a chaotic environment, and
Hmm.
even chaos addiction that can take place for many warrior types. But what I really saw was the element of resilience, what the body, the adaptations that can occur when you have been through adversity.
Yeah.
And the most successful people that I have ever known have been through extraordinary adversity.
Yeah.
Most of the real high achievers, and I myself had some very difficult traumatic events that took place as about teenage times that I definitely know forged this capacity, this like inner fire and resilience. And so what that's kind of led me down this path, and this is something I'm currently writing on right now, is that I think in our nation today, there's almost been a rise of fragility. And I think it's we have a hyper awareness culture. We're aware of every health problem, we're aware of every mental health,
Right.
aware of anxiety, aware of someone's, generational trauma, and this person's gaslighting me, aware of how this makes me feel. And I don't think awareness in and of itself is a bad thing, but
Right.
awareness without hope that something can actually change,
Right.
awareness without action, where you're just stuck in a state of being inundated with information. But then you think, oh, the awareness culture then breeds a sensitivity culture because you think, okay, I don't know what to do. I feel hopeless without action. So I
Mm.
need my environment to become sensitive so I know how I can, kind of live in this space. And we see this with health a lot too, where resilience, the ability to adapt under extraordinary circumstances, I mean, that's ultimately what we're looking for. And so, is sensitivity a good thing? Sure. Awareness is a good thing, but I'm very passionate with any subject that it's about knowing the action to take. It's
Yeah.
about allowing what you've been through to be an adaptation that can actually be an extraordinary gift. And so, there's the science behind all that, and that's a book I've just finished. His name is Dr. Eugene Lipoff. He's the one who innovated the stellate ganglion block procedure that basically can reset the nervous system from a state of fight or flight back to homeostasis. So
Mm.
that's working on the physical resilience side. But then
Yeah.
you see these ones like BB Aisha or Tyler Gray that, totally different. You got a warrior, you have a young Afghan girl, but the human's ability to forge resilience is incredible. So that in the business world is really where I'm putting a lot of emphasis right now, and a lot of exciting things coming up there, which is just to have a healthcare system that actually works on resilience building and both mind and body together. So it
Yeah.
started to answer your question to what made me think of it differently. I
Hmm.
just saw what's possible,
Right.
and that the most successful people, they didn't have the lucky breaks necessarily, but they were the
Hmm.
ones that got in the arena and said, I will succeed. And they used everything as an adaptation to create further resilience. And so, yeah, that made me think about the world a bit differently.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and we talked offline about it. I'd like to talk a little bit about it. Is I think also the ability you've had and what you've the opportunity you've taken to travel. I think that's one thing that, and I've talked to a lot of people before. They're like, well, I just don't have the money to travel, which I totally understand. And for a piece of my life, I was in that same position. But a lot of times it's where do you prioritize your money? You can probably, I mean, there's flights overseas that aren't always terribly expensive, depending on where you want to go. Um, that maybe if you didn't have as many online subscriptions or you didn't eat out as much and you just kind of did some bare bones few months, you'd realize, hey, I've got enough of a plane ticket to fly to London or to fly to Barcelona or wherever. And, and then you get there, you don't have to go stay at a five-star hotel. There are other options. And especially if you get out away from kind of the touristy centers of towns and you start getting to places where the average person lives, cost of food, street vendors, depending on what city you're in. I mean, there's so many opportunities for you. And I think for people to kind of, again, get out of that comfort zone and go see a different place and different culture, that's only expands your mind, which I think in the end only makes your community back home stronger because you have new life lessons that you can kind of share with the others around you.
Yeah. And that's the interesting thing is Americans in particular tend to stay here or maximum go to like an all-inclusive resort or a
Yeah,
cruise
right. Or
as a travel
cruise.
experience,
Yeah,
where the rest of the world is typically exactly, yeah. Like they have an excursion, they like D board or D plane or D ship, however you say that,
yeah,
to Italy, and they spend half an afternoon, they kind of come back on and that sort of thing. Where the rest of the world really goes and visits. I mean, you get to Europe, everyone's been, everywhere. And so
yeah.
I think what you gain through travel is perspective. Like it fundamentally changed so much of how I saw the world, how I saw our own country, how
Right.
I understood freedom, how I understood what real oppression looks like.
Hmm.
So it certainly gives you a completely different perspective from around the world. And also a deep sense of gratitude for, I think, the opportunity it is to be an American citizen. It's like I felt that at some point, but you don't really fully understand until you do have something to compare it to. And so to
Right.
understand what that is and the privilege and responsibility it is to be an American citizen, I think definitely changed. But as far as the budget goes, there came a time I told you when writing's taking off, have the opportunity to travel. And I did the math and, had the big Texas house and the two vehicles. And, then you need the lawn care service and then the house cleaning service and then the TiVo and then this and that. Added it all up. And I was like, you can luxury travel the world for what you spend to just have a basic American. So there was
Yeah.
a season, sold everything, went down to a suitcase and lived full time a year just across the world. Best thing I ever did,
Yes.
fundamentally changed my life. And, I know not everyone has that opportunity to do. Of course, I'm grateful to have a remote job.
Right.
But certainly, I mean, when people say they don't have money, I'm like, but Disney World, you'll drop 8 to 10K for a family to go to Disney World for 1, 2 weeks. 8 to 10K, I will get you across Europe. You're going to have the
Oh yeah.
best trip of your life for
Exactly.
8 to 10K overseas. So, yeah, it's definitely more about priorities.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, so I was 19. I went to Europe for the first time, and it was actually through my college, and it was a history tour. And it was one of these trips where they announced it. I was my freshman year. They announced it like 2, 3 weeks into the school. We had a big meeting. Everyone was gathered in the auditorium, and like, hey, we're doing a history tour the next summer, which would have been after my freshman year. And it was a 3 week tour of Europe. And me and a bunch of friends were like, that would be so cool. And I was supposed to go to Europe. I'm dating myself with my age and my gray. I was supposed to go during the first Gulf War. So what, 91, 92, whatever that was, 91, I think. And I was in high school and the trip got canceled because the State Department said, hey, not a good idea for Americans to travel. So I kind of had this like hankering of, I've got to get it to Europe. So I'm in college. This trip's offered. I want to say, I should know exactly. I want to say it was in the neighborhood of 5,000 or so for the 3 weeks, which is really inexpensive. But you're on a bus, you're packed in, you're double occupancy college kids. It's not
Yeah.
not glamorous, but so they like that. They said that day you could go. They had their own little tour operator. Back in the day, you used to be able to go and buy plane tickets. Folks be like, "What in the
That's
world?" Yeah,
right.
you actually went to an operator to buy them. There wasn't these things were not as
Older.
technology advanced in the mid to late 90s. So I went and put my deposit. I think I called my parents and said, "Hey," because unlike most of the kids in my class that wanted to do it, I wasn't asking mom or dad. I had been saving money to buy a car. I had a clunker and I was going to buy a nicer car. And I kind of just weighed my options at that point and said, do I want to go to Europe or do I want a car? And I'm like, I can buy a car another time. I can save up
Okay.
my money. So I went down there, did the deposit the day it was offered, paid it in full. As we're over, it was funny. As we were over there, I was in a jewelry store in Milan with one of the girls on the trip, and we're just kind of looking around. And I saw this thing. I was like, "Oh, that would be cool to buy." She goes, "I can't buy anything. My parents would kill me." I was like, "What?" She goes, "My parents are paying that. Like, I've got their credit card." And she goes, "Are you paying for this on your own?" And I was like, "Yes, yes." And
Oh,
if I want
like,
something, I'm gonna buy it because how often am I in Milan? So I bought it. I was like, I'm gonna buy it. And that whole trip was like that. And I came back, and I've told this story to my kids as they've gotten older. I knew at that point in my life that was probably the best trip I'd ever do in my life. And that's not a negative comment to say you're 19 and you're going on your best trip. I knew it would be my best trip because it would be such a eye-opening experience and it would make me appreciate so many things better than I had at that point. And that's what it really did. It opened up, and I saw like 6 countries in 3 weeks. A couple of those countries I've not been back to. Some of them I have in the last 20 years, 20 plus years now since the trip. But that experience and that culture, if people can do it, I always tell them, man, try to do it. And like you just said, there's a way to sacrifice and to do some travel for most people. There are exceptions of people that just cannot make it happen for life experience. Their life doesn't work that way, and I get that. But for most people, it's how do you want to prioritize your money to be able to get somewhere?
Well, and I think there's a difference between travel and vacations. And this is something I run into in
Yes,
conversation with Americans is that they say, well, what I want on my vacation is to be in an all-inclusive resort, have margaritas, and be able to sleep and this kind of thing, which is lovely. I mean, we all need actual vacations.
right.
But if you can put a different category with travel, it can be very relaxing, but part of what you're doing is you're seeing and experiencing the world in a way that's changing your paradigm. It's
Yeah,
changing how you see the world. And to actually be able to shape worldview, I think is one of the most valuable things because it'll start to test how you see things. And
yep,
there's nuance to the different mental infrastructure that different cultures have that you don't really get until you're there for months on end or years on end
right.
to see, some cultures see you as part of a collective,
Hmm.
some see individual. And Americans, we don't even understand that. We only understand life from the perspective of an individual rights and freedoms, thoughts and opinions. And others,
Right.
they only see themselves as a part of this one tribe and organism. And
Yeah.
so the way you see the world, the way you contribute to the world, the way that you pay attention to things. And so it's not just that people speak other languages. There's a huge difference in how people see the world, but you'll also understand history, wars, conflict. I mean, money making, business, commerce, everything, negotiations. I mean, that's something you get. The art of negotiation is not something Americans live day to day, having to forge. We're just like, you give me the price, I pay you, and
Right.
everyone, the rest of the world's like, well, you're dumb, you didn't engage in the game, you gotta get in there a little bit. And so anyway, yes, very enlightening,
Yeah.
humbling. It'll change you for sure. And it's incredibly valuable.
Yeah. Yeah, just what you learn. I was having dinner. We had talked offline. I took my mom to the UK for Thanksgiving this last year, and we were having dinner in Edinburgh, and the place is called the Witchery, and I think it was built in the room we were having dinner in was built in like the 1500s or something. And you're kind of just looking around, and it's like, in the United States, we tear everything down within 20 or 30 years, even the stadiums most of the time. I say that as a jest. Obviously, we have older buildings, but so much of it is just put it up, bulldoze it, put up another building, bulldoze it. I was in town a couple weeks ago, and one of the old places had been shut down for a while. It was gone. And there was a bunch of backhoes and other stuff. And it's like, oh, they'll be putting in a convenience store. They'll be putting in something. It's like we have, at least for us, it's such a disposable culture. And I think that comes at a price. It comes at a price for our very being when we live that way.
Well, the positive is that we're an innovative culture and we like
Right.
change, we push change, and America is typically on the forefront of change, but we do like what's new. We prize young, we prize new, we prize innovation. But what does come in other cultures, you see, they do prize age and wisdom.
Hmm.
And you even that's kind of the downside is that yes, we're the innovators, we're the front lines of technology and medicine and new trends, even in, art and music and movies,
Yeah.
film, but we always need what's new. And so you see other places, they see legacy, heritage, and they see wisdom as something that the entire culture prizes.
Yeah.
And that's unfortunate to me because I don't think we prize the wisdom of the elderly.
Right.
Past a certain age, we kind of look at you like obsolete, and we have a younger group that says, "You don't know what you're talking about. We know best." And so there's almost an arrogancy with youth in
Hmm.
America that there's not the reverence to say, like, this person saw a lot. I want to gain the wisdom that you have. So that's a downside. I do wish our nation prized a little bit more of the wisdom of those who've lived and gone before.
Well, you can learn so much, and obviously you're a great listener, so you're learning as you talk to more people, and you're 100% right. You having that mindset of thinking, "Oh, I know it," or "Oh, they're older, they probably," you don't know what morsel you can get from them that might make you rethink how you're living your life or the decisions you're making. I always tell that to my kids. I was just like, look, there's some lessons you're just going to have to learn because you fall flat on your face and you didn't put your foot in front of the other foot, whatever it might be. But any of the things you can learn from other people, why go through the heartache when you can have an example of someone? And I always like, I bring it back to something that I don't know if I've talked about on the podcast before, but drugs. And, drugs obviously is one of the things that sometimes is a bigger deal than other times. And society-wise, we've legalized things in the last 10 years that were illegal. And that goes back and forth. And my take on it is very much more libertarian, but I've never done a drug in my life. And the reason I've not done a drug in my life is when I was a young person, I think I was 11, um, my grandfather was having medical issues and basically passing away. And so the whole family was gathered to see and say goodbye to my grandfather. He was 89, 88 years old. So um, we all gather, we all meet there, we're in the hospital, and they could bring you back two at a time to basically say goodbye to grandpa. My uncle was brought in to say goodbye to his dad. He wasn't alone. He had a guy on either side of him, and he was shackled to him because he was in prison yet again. And one of his biggest problems was drugs. And I don't say that lightly or demeaning him. He ended up passing away years later from that. But as a kid at that impressionable age, that to me was the end of drugs. That's what drugs will get you. And it was always something. And then when I got into high school and people offered me something, my thought always went back to my uncle and said, if there's a chance me taking that will turn me into him, there's no chance I'm going to do it. And it's always been something that's kind of, and I've said it to my kids. I was like, there's some lessons if you can learn from someone having a drug problem or having one of these big problems. You don't need to go down that path to learn that lesson. Follow their example of what not to do with your life.
Well, this is why history is so important. And like, even for me as a writer to bring these stories is because human behavior is very cyclical. We
Yeah.
keep doing the same things over and
Right.
over and over and over. And so I remember there was some push in the education system to say, hey, we need more time just spent on technology with kids. Kids don't need to learn history nearly like they did, blah, blah, blah. This is irrelevant. I'm like, no, this body of knowledge that you have to gain and learn from someone else's mistake is perhaps the most valuable commodity that's out there.
Right.
But yet, again, we just like, we have this amnesia. We just forget. We think it's irrelevant. We think it's old, it's dated, it's the grandfather's time. He's just telling a war story. He's just doing this and that. But no, the value that we can gain from studying and looking and saying, like, oh, this isn't the first time we've been through this.
Right.
I think tremendously valuable.
Yeah. Well, like kind of like we were talking about before, and you mentioned earlier with just technology and kind of the information that's out there, and you can see, and you especially with some of the people you can kind of see all the bad things humanity have done or doing to each other. And I think we have this mindset, especially with advent of technology and Amber Alerts and all the different things. There was billboards driving down Interstate 85 yesterday that said missing person, and it gave the license plate and the make. There's a Nissan or whatever it was. I can picture it. I don't have photographic memory. I can picture the thing. I don't remember all the digits. But so we have this amazing technology now, but we also go, man, people are horrible. It's like, have you studied
Yeah.
the Romans? Have you
Right,
studied
right. Yeah, yeah.
have you studied Genghis Khan? I mean, have you like you don't get the concept of like going into villages and raping and murder, killing the animal, killing everything. So it's just now that
True.
stuff doesn't happen anymore. Now, do bad things happen? Yes, but it's
Right,
not like back then it was, rainbows and unicorns and now we're living in hell. It's like we know when the abductions happen now and we know these monsters
right,
that
right.
are
Very aware.
molesting kids and all that. And maybe that is more prevalent now because of technology. Maybe stuff like that is more prevalent, but it's not,
Our awareness is
our
just higher. Our
it's
awareness has
absolutely.
skyrocketed for everything, by the way, and
Yeah.
even I'm doing the health world is that, anxiety is now the fastest growing diagnosis. It's growing by exponential amounts. And you're going like, what's happening here? It's just our awareness of it has grown. But again, that's where I'm going to come back to like awareness without hope or action.
Yeah.
That's when you get stuck.
Yeah.
And I think the chronic fear and stress that a lot of people are living with right now, that they actually think this is the worst time humanity's ever been through. So there's an uneasiness, there's an uncertainty constantly that you feel, coupled with you're inundated with information about
Mm.
how bad the world is. I mean, this is a huge evolution of the human mind trying to take place like we've never seen before. And so, I mean, even I think if we compared to like the 80s, I think even just since then, I
Yeah.
mean, the world that kids are growing up in now, it's incredible. And so that's why, I mean, when we study, I mean, it's a very unfortunate thing, but suicide rates right now are the highest they've been since the Great Depression. I mean, they're skyrocketing. And
Yeah.
so I think it has a lot to do with these things. And so that's where you have to show that, that understanding the context of history, understanding where you're at, actually educating, and then giving people the tools to take action when they need to and take responsibility for lives and bodies and choices is such a big thing.
Yeah. Well, especially like yourself with interviewing Jeff and meeting these soldiers that you have done over the years now, that group, that community has kind of been so, what's it? I forget what the numbers are, 22, 23 a day. And I think that number I've been told is like false. It's much higher than that of how many soldiers, commit suicide every day. And he's talking like yesterday, I was with my friend who his father passed away and he's a veteran. He retired. He was fifth group. And just seeing the kind of the strain because he let's see, I graduated in 99. He ended up taking a year off while we were in college and he didn't go finish. He actually got a regular job and then said I remember the day he called me. He's like, I'm joining the army. And I was like, you doing what? But it was something he had always talked about wanting to do. College was something his mom wanted him to do. And so he did it. He lived that life. And then so that was what 2000. So it was probably 6 months to a year before 9/11. So he spent his entire career basically in active warfare. I don't have it hanging behind me, but he would always get me a souvenir from his deployments, and they were typically flags. So I actually have the flag that was hanging between Jordan and Iraq during the invasion that he got for me. So yeah, I had my last office. I actually had it huge framed, had it up there. Now it's not framed. It's not in a box. It's in a box right now. I've got to reorganize where I'm going to put it in a new place. Um, but just seeing him and the transformation he went through in the course of going through that career and he was single. He wanted to, since he was a soldier, he wanted to be deployed. He didn't want to just be sitting here in the United States sitting on a base training. He wanted to take that and put it into action. So he would always like as soon as he could go back out, he would. And there was a 10-year span he was hardly here. I'd see him every several years for a couple days, and that was it. But there's the toll, and you've seen that yourself with just talking to these soldiers of there's a toll of what that does to you.
Oh yeah. And I mean, this kind of circles back to the question you asked, like, was there someone who changed the way you saw something? And my book that's about to come out called Forged in Chaos that I did with Tyler Gray, former Delta
Mhm.
Force, it fundamentally changed the way I saw PTSD.
Yeah.
And he's the one, as we got to talking, he's like, look, PTSD is real, it exists, but the entire diagnosis revolves around there being a single event that takes place. So it says, I'm one way. Now, an event takes place, trauma. Post this event, and this is how it's diagnosed in the DSM.
Mhm.
Now I have a disorder. And it neglects to take into account the adaptation that occurs from the environment that you have been in. And for many people, it actually creates neurologically, and we can prove this now, a chaos addiction. So
Mm.
what happens is you've got someone who's neurologically rewired, and this is what happens to most warriors, is they will tell you, so civilians think, oh, you must be so stressed in the middle of combat. That's the worst thing. Now you're so happy that you're home in this calm environment. Most warriors will tell you they feel the most calm when it's high stress, when
Mhm.
they're operating, they're hyper vigilant, they're on. And this is true for first responders and any of the warrior archetypes. But then when you need to just relax, sleep, try and go on a vacation, your anxiety skyrockets.
Yeah.
And so this inversion of neurological wiring that a lot of warriors see, I don't think we've really talked about that. And so what happens? You try to find devices of chaos. And so it's no secret that sex, drugs, alcohol, there's a very scientific reason why this is following the warrior community. It's not some psychological failing. And so I think the divide we've created by thinking that this event took place and now I have a psychological disorder.
Hmm.
It just neglects to take into account the physiological changes, the adaptations
Yeah.
that occur when you become physically addicted to chaos. And
Right.
so, I mean, that's a big thing that we're working on from several angles. I mean, I'm coming at it from the health angle. Everything I'm doing in my company is to really basically completely change how we see the treatment of the mind and body, and especially for warriors. But then through this book that's coming out here, up ahead is hopefully to shift the paradigm that it
Hmm.
says, yes, does PTSD exist? Of course. But we need to be able to see how we treat our warriors and talking about chaos addiction, talking about the fracture in identity. And actually, very interestingly, the rates of childhood trauma and those who pursue warrior careers is very high. So
Hmm.
oftentimes you have someone that's actually grown up in a chaotic, traumatic environment. So they already have the adaptation to remain calm in chaos. That's
Hmm.
why they're so good at the job. The training didn't actually forge the capacity. They were like that before they entered.
From
It's
their
why they chose
adolescence.
it.
Wow.
Exactly. It's why they chose it. It's why they're good at it. They stood up when everything was coming in around them. They're the ones that fought back and said, I'm going to try and protect myself. And it forged, they're amazing warriors because of it. They're able to remain calm when everyone else, everything else is chaotic, but it just comes at a price. And
Yeah.
so one of the lines from the book is the same superpower that makes you superheroes in the eyes of the world can turn you into a supervillain in your own life. And that's really what happens for a lot of warriors. So subject I'm passionate about. I'm really grateful to have worked with Tyler because he very much changed my idea of that. And I've worked with a lot of warriors, members of special forces from all backgrounds, but that certainly changed the way that I saw that.
Yeah. Well, I think when that book comes out, if you if you guys don't come on my podcast, maybe we'll get you on John's. John does the bigger spear talk. And I think it would be fascinating to have
Sure, absolutely.
you and Tyler come on and talk with John. And I'd look forward to read the book because yeah, that's something I'm passionate about. And a lot of it is because of my friend, because, again, I met him my freshman year of college, thought this guy's a jerk. We were roommates. I was like, I'm never going to be friends with this guy. And we've known each other now since 1995, and he's one of my closest friends. But I've kind of watched his progression over the years from kind of that, as close as you can be as being a friend, basically, and watch how it's changed. And I've tried to read a lot of the articles, and I know back when we did the invasion, and especially, we used, special forces communities in Afghanistan and Iraq heavily before the big military even came in. And what they had found years ago was those guys would come off a deployment and they'd come, a 6 month or 9 month or sometimes a year deployment. They'd come back home and we didn't have any programs really in place. And okay, reintegrate immediately. Plane lands, your truck's parked over in that lot where it's been the last 6 months. Get in your truck and go home. And what happens is these guys were coming home and they were killing their spouses, or they were killing, or there was some, not obviously a large portion of them, but enough of them were happening that the army all of a sudden and the military realized, okay, we need to actually probably transition these guys back to regular life. And that was one of the questions I had for my buddy when he was over there. And I'm like, because he was SF for a good portion when he was deployed, and I can talk a little bit about it now because it's been so many years. But I was like, man, how do you handle, the IEDs and all the different things? And he's like, we don't follow any of the rules. He's like, big army goes down the main boulevard with tanks and Bradleys and all this other stuff, and they're getting the shit bombed out of them. He goes, we're SF guys. He goes, we're in like a Toyota Tacoma. We mount a 50 cal to it. We drive the opposite side of the road you're supposed to. And if people don't move, we shoot at their vehicles. He's like, we're not getting blown up. We're not getting bombed or anything's happening. He goes, because we're breaking all the rules. He's like, and that's how we're surviving. Take that mindset and then go to Walmart in Fort Campbell, Kentucky, a day after you've gotten back home. Not a good mixture.
No, 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 because you're adapted for another environment.
Yeah.
And I think it's surprising that we don't talk about that. Like there's a portion of our society, and I think in a society that no longer really nurtures the natural born warrior archetype in young boys, and it could be girls too, just significantly more dominant for males,
Yeah.
used to you see some of these qualities coming up. So your older warriors would begin to nurture this, but society saw warriors as a necessary part of society. Where I think our perceived sense of safety being a given now in America makes us think we don't need that. So what
Right.
do I see? Most special forces flunk out of school. They're terrible in public school. They hated it because they weren't, their archetype is not great in this, conformist environment. And so that's an interesting thing too, that without that, who are the people who are still really adapted for high stakes, high stress environments? Typically, those who came out of trauma or some kind of adversity.
Yeah.
And those are the ones that are really good in this. But what does that come with? A conditioning that's then reinforced by training. And then, like you said, I mean, used to guys would spend 3 months coming home from war. They would be on ships and they would take time. I think actually for the mind, it was probably better that way
Mhm.
to take time before you show up and see the wife,
Yeah.
and the kids take some time to deacclimate from this environment. But I mean, you're getting on a plane and you're landing, and next thing you know, you're an In-N-Out burger, and
Yeah.
it's like, hey, come back, that's it. And we don't really, and even as a society, know how to help reintegrate, know how to help
Right.
have a better conversation, know how to help you understand that your nervous system's upgraded or that you're operating in hypervigilance. And
Yep.
so all of those things, I hope we can start having some better conversations here in the near future about this entire subject because we need to for sure.
Well, we've not we as a community of citizens is we've sent our warriors out to fight wars now for going on 20 years, and we've not given them the tools when they come home to adjust back to how our perceived reality of what society should look like, and also deal with, like you mentioned, deal with the traumas of what they've just had to go through. And we've asked them to do it, whether we as the citizen have voted for it or whatever. We've put people in power that have made decisions, and those decisions, you don't get into the military and you get a direct order and say, no, I don't really feel good about taking this city. I think we just need to pay it back. No, that's your job. And I've kind of asked my buddy, because I have another buddy as well who's active duty now. And so we'll sit there sometimes for hours when I see him a couple times a year. And I just like to pick his brain on, like, how do you decide to do this and how do you decide to that? And, he's told me a few times, it's like, well, it's a job. He's like, this is my role to do. And he said, and there's parameters I have to follow as part of my job. And he said, a lot of that emotion, all that, I can't put in there because that would interfere with getting the job completed.
Well, we teach compartmentalization, and then we're
Yeah.
surprised later why the person's so good at compartmentalizing. Well, I know what you do and what you needed to do. And so I agree. I think there's a lot of work that we need to do and just how we treat it. And then there's also the loss of identity and purpose. I mean,
Yeah.
you're talking for a lot of people really find a sense of identity, brotherhood, purpose,
Right.
and very few career paths even. Let's just talk about it as a career. Let's look at it like a job. Do you go along and you put everything into becoming something, and then in a single day you could just be done and walk away, and then you
Yeah.
really start from zero again? And I
Yeah.
think that in and of itself is its own thing, and so that's what the book does is, hey, there's a lot more to this conversation than just event-based PTSD.
Right.
And so, yeah,
Yeah.
looking
My
forward to
buddy
it
is,
coming out. Go ahead.
no,
Sorry.
please go ahead.
Yeah,
When's
no,
it?
I said it should be out probably by the time this airs for pre-order.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. I think my buddy retired at 45. So he was 20 years in. He was 45 at the time, and he's retired. And yeah, what do you do? He ended up doing contract work, still does it some. But yeah, you have to find your purpose. And I mean, I don't know that I'll get to retire with corporate America. The way corporate America works, like, I have to find another path for retirement. Probably not Social Security either, if that's still in existence in 20, 25 years or whatever. But yeah, that identity, and it totally becomes, much more so than working for corporate America or doing some of the things that I do, is I could walk away from my finance job tomorrow, especially if I knew, like, if I knew the books could pay my bills. Sure, there's aspects I'd miss, but it's not like ingrained in my being, which I think for people that have served our government, as a soldier in any of the branches, it becomes part of their identity of who they are. So when that's taken away, and sometimes it's been taken away, not by their choice. There was, I know, like, during, and not getting the political side of it, but there was people that lost being in the military because they didn't want vaccination. So they were like, okay, you have to get out of the military now. And it's like,
That's who I am.
That's me. What do you mean that's me? And then there's some people, of course, that would say, well, to just get the damn vaccination. It's like, well, but if they have a qualm, and I've talked because I know enough soldiers. I've kind of seen both sides of that argument. But at the end of the day, when that identity is taken away, something's going to fill that void. It has to fill
Yeah.
that void, and if not, that's when I think the horrible rates kick in of people going to something to give them some kind of something to fill that void, but it's empty, and it's not really a purpose driven life at that point. So before we get, I
Well,
know we're getting close to an hour, so I want to be respectful of your time. Have you noticed culturally how different is it to be, at least for regular everyday life, to be outside the United States, where you are more in like Eastern Europe? Um, is it distinct, the difference between growing like living in Texas and that the Texas mindset probably is one of the more unique ones to have in the United States because they're if you're proud to be anywhere in this country, it's not necessary. I grew up in Connecticut. I don't ever
born
meet
into
someone that
stay in
says
Texas.
I was born in Connecticut. But if you were born in Texas and bred in Texas, you're like, damn the rest of that country. Texas should be its own state. Or should be its own country, basically.
You know, the funny part is that most Americans, when they're overseas and they're said, "Hey, where are you from?" they say America. But Texans, they don't even say they come from America. I'm Texan. And you'll see this anywhere in the world, and they're like, I come from Texas, And certainly it's been, I mean, such a eye-opening experience. And
Mm,
definitely it made me see myself and my own nation differently
yeah.
by contrast comparison. It made me see other places differently. And so, I mean, there's a whole many ways you could answer that. I think from the food culture perspective, you realize like how tough it is in America actually to get high quality food at a reasonable price. I mean, I can eat huge portions of the Mediterranean diet every day, and you never gain weight. You don't have to think about it.
Yeah.
It just the intentionality it takes, the hypervigilance it takes to, really be healthy in America. I mean, it's tough, but then there's other things that, take time and nuance to understand. I think the opportunity that Americans have from the robust economy, the implications of what that means in a day-to-day life, it gave me a sense of gratitude. We see things like Shark Tank or they talk about the American dream, but it's a given that if you want to work hard, if there's entrepreneurship, if you have an entrepreneurial mind, you can just get out there and you can achieve something, you can succeed. But you will understand that if you try and do the exact same set of things in a different environment, then, it may not have the same results. And so I think that's a very interesting one, no matter what your political leaning is that I think it's something that Americans oftentimes don't have as much of an understanding of the incredible gift it is, the
Mhm.
incredible responsibility it is to foster that opportunity and how many people around the world, would love that. So
Yeah.
there's difference to that. But what comes with that is a hyper achievement culture that we have. And
Mhm.
that was enlightening for me to see how much of the American identity is wrapped up in achievement. And
Yeah.
I remember sitting down at this table and it was like all Europeans around like France and, Italians, all this kind of stuff. And they're like, how's your week been? And I do what most Americans do. I start to like exhaustion brag, which is I was working till late, didn't have a break, works kicking my teeth, all this. And by the way, I was proud because it's
Mhm.
normal for us to exhaustion brag. The faces everyone dropped, no one's eating their food. And they staged an intervention for me. I mean, really, where's your passion in life? Are you
Yeah.
sleeping? What kind of life is this? And so for
Right.
them, real life, like, job is one thing, but career is only one aspect of who you are and your identity. And so that was also very eye-opening for me. So with anything, the benefits that you get in one way, there's always going to be some drawbacks. So it's a bit of a mixed bag, but certainly it will change your perspective on all of it.
Well, probably being married to a gourmet chef probably was not a poor choice
Life hack.
either.
Life hack. Best life hack ever. When I say, babe, I'm kind of a little munchy and it's like midnight, he's like, let me make fresh pasta. And I thought he meant like, put the dry pasta in the boiling pot. I go in there and there's the machine and dough is spread across. And he's like, how would you like your raviolis filled? And I was like, oh, how would I like my raviolis filled? So, but yes, definitely best life hack of all.
Well, I'm single, Not really looking currently, but like in about 4 years, the kids will be out of the house age, and I'm willing to relocate to Europe. So if you know a female chef who just
Gotcha.
wants is okay with a writer and okay with a travel lifestyle, keep me in mind and
She
hook me
will
up.
write and get fat and happy, and she'll just cook nonstop. And it's gonna be a match made in heaven. I
The
got
funny
you.
thing is, I'm in the process, and I did it. So I did it last year. I hit that, we talk offline. I went through divorce, hit that kind of rock bottom part in life, and then last year, yeah, a little over a year ago, 14, 16 months ago, I kind of was like, man, I'm just not feeling good. And it got on a scale, and I looked at that number, and I was like, there's no that. I literally looked at the scale and said, it's broken. I went to another scale, and the next scale had the same number, and I'm like, God
Oh
bless
shit.
America. What have I done? So this is a year ago, January 2024, I was like, that's it. I'm doing carnivore for 2 months. I'm doing all this stuff. And I literally did drop a good chunk of my percentage of what I should have done. Well, then I fell off the wagon halfway through the year. I was like, I had some trips going on, and I was like, I'll have a little fun for a few weeks. And that turned into by the end of last year, I put all the weight back on, which I was so pissed at myself. So you better believe, and I'm pretty good once I set my mind to something. Obviously, last year was a bad example. I failed, but I was like, okay, we're doing this again, and we're going to actually not just try to lose weight. We're going to try to make fundamental changes and then maintain it. So I'm in that transition now where I'm about halfway where I want to be, but my goals aren't like I got to lose this in 6 months because I know if I force it, then by 8 months I've already started to put weight back on.
Absolutely.
I'm making so like you were talking about with the food stuff. I look at every freaking now I cheat and go to like I took my daughter to Raising Cane's, which is like a chicken and French fry place a week ago, which I've had once in the year. Will I do something that I know I don't want to look at the ingredients because it's death? Yeah, I'll do that. But that's the exception of the rule now. That's not, on the weekends I don't have my kids, I don't go, ooh, I can eat out here for breakfast, here for lunch, here for no, none of that. It's like, no, guess what? You're having yogurt, bacon, a cup of coffee, steak for dinner, no carbs on this meal, and just very structured. But that's where, so all that to say,
Coming upstream in America, I will tell you that. I mean, I feel bloated and gross within 48 hours
yeah,
of eating in America, even if I'm choosing all the same foods, but it's the fundamental quality of our foods is not the same. I mean,
right,
most people don't know Europeans won't even allow American ingredients into their country. Like there a lot of stuff they can't even allow there. And so it is, I didn't realize until living outside the United States for a long amount of time, the compartmentalization we have to have between healthy and unhealthy,
right,
where it's kind of a foreign concept to people. They just say, hey, you could skip dessert or you could have less portioning, but they don't think of it as diet food versus healthy food as
exactly.
much.
Um,
You can eat a lot more quantity.
Yeah, well, like, and I won't. I never go into the politics stuff for writing because I want liberals and conservative. I want everyone to buy my books. But like with RFK Jr. coming in, and I know it was very polarizing. It's like for me, I was like, even if he just gets us on the same standards of Europe, because even when I was over there this last trip and two trips before, I did the same thing before I was even thinking as much as I should have along the healthy. And it's like, guess what? They sell Skittles in London. But flip around and look at the ingredients, and you realize, oh, there's no red 40 or yellow 5 or cake this or that. They use dyes for it. So again, are Skittles healthy in the UK? No, it's a snack. It's a junk. It's a treat that you probably don't need, but at
Yeah.
least they don't have high fructose corn syrup. And like I think Skittles especially, like the first ingredient's high fructose corn syrup, and then it's like sugar. And then the third ingredient's corn syrup. So like the first three or four ingredients are three forms of a sugar. It's like, oh, I don't see how we have diabetes in this country. I
Also,
don't.
the art of table culture and the way people are eating is totally different. So it's really
Yeah,
like fast food is almost non-existent. People don't eat in their cars. And so everything is served to you with like real, there's no disposables. Why? When you go to Italy, you have a cup of coffee, you just go in there and they serve it to you, drink it, you sit there for a minute and you leave. And so the thoughtfulness, I think, that goes into the intentionality of eating too is very different. And it's an event.
yeah,
I mean, what's funny though is you kind of have to work up your muscle to it. I mean, here, like if you sit and have a long table, I mean, I have sat for 8 to 9 hour dinners and it starts early and goes, and you just slowly graze, you wait,
yeah,
it's very thoughtful. But me
right,
as an American, and I grew up in a big family too, and it was like when the pizza's down, you get in your slice, survival of the fittest, baby. Like you
right.
got it. or you're out, and it's like dibs. And so I'm sitting there and I'm well cultured and I love fine dining, all this, but I was eating fast, and
Yeah,
I thought that was all that we were going to eat was just the cold starters. And then they're like, no, 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 we haven't seen the hot starters. Then the hot starters come. Then I was like, okay, that was delicious. And I was about to call for the check. And then I see a fish coming, a fish
yeah.
with it on and everything. They're sitting down. I was
Oh,
like, more. So you do learn some of that intentionality, the art of, table culture and, and then accessibility, I think just, your butcher, you get your bread daily. There's no preservatives in it.
yeah.
You get groceries and, vegetables from the farmer that's closest to you and fish from the fisherman that brought it in that morning. So just that we don't have that distribution even to be able to do that. In Texas, if you want fresh fish, I mean, you're still coming in 24 hours. I mean, that's if you're in middle Texas, there's no coastline to go down and meet your local fishermen. I mean, unless it's like a lake and you want to go like catfish style.
Yeah.
I grew up in that little hush puppies, little catfish, nothing wrong with that, but yeah, definitely different.
My daughter's got in the last year, my daughter's got me going to Aldi, which it's
It's an
not a
experience.
yeah, it's different. I had gone to one years ago and I'm like, yeah, this isn't for me. There's one choice for everything, which actually I'm open to changing. I've actually flipped a mindset where I go to Aldi more than I go to the regular grocery store now. And there's only certain things I get there, but there are a couple of really all natural things they sell. One of the things I saw advertised, I still haven't bought it, but I did look at it really closely twice now, is they have a three ingredient sourdough bread. As basic as you can get, no preservatives. But me being half the time I don't have my kids and I love food, and there's the fat guy in me always wants to come out. It's like, yeah, I could buy this
Want the
bread,
local
but
bread sitting there.
do I want to throw away like 85% of it because if not, I'll eat it. And it's like, so I keep looking at it. I just won't buy it. It's like, I don't want to buy it for two
I
slices
know
and be
myself
like,
and my willpower. It's not gonna,
it, well, and my willpower will kick in. I can do it, but it's
Yeah.
more now the side of me that goes, do I need to waste that much bread? And I mean, I guess I
Freeze
could
it.
give it to
It'll freeze it well, doesn't it? You could just thaw it out. But it's not as good. I mean, that is
I
true.
know. I'm see. Like you live in a great place for this. Is like the all the times I've been overseas in Europe. It's the fact of going to a place and
Yeah.
having it not like you go to most places in the United States. There's mom and pop bakeries. There's some near me actually, but a lot of the places it's all brought in. So you're
Yeah.
getting something that's made in a main distribution place and it's sent out to like Dunkin' Donuts and all these other
You
places.
just like to slap the label artisan on something so you can charge like $1.50 more. It's like fresh
Yes,
artisan bread that's been frozen and preserved for weeks on end. But yeah, you definitely see a huge difference. And actually, back in the States, I was totally dairy-free, gluten-free, hyper paleo, everything just to solve my gut health issues.
interesting.
It was only until I started to like barely dip my toe in the water. I was like, can I try this cheese? And, it was like some really, really fresh, and they have
Yeah.
sheep's milk and goat's milk and, from cow as well. But and then I did the same with bread and I
Mhm.
noticed I felt amazing. I felt
Yeah.
great. It didn't have any effect, but but the bread stays good 24 hours. I mean, you have to really go daily to do your shopping. So
Right.
that's a interesting thing. I had this like meal prep mindset, which was
Yeah.
I would get ingredients and then I would cook for a whole week. And that's unheard of
Yeah.
for the European mind. It's like, we'll go out today. You have a relationship with your butcher, you have a relationship with your baker, relationship with your, fisherman, and you go and you collect what's fresh and good. And they're big on seasonal too. I was trying to find something at the grocery store. Where's this vegetable? And my husband laughed. He's like, it's not the season for that. It's winter. Like, why would you look for it there? And in
Right.
my mind, I'm like, but I want my pineapples in December, because
Exactly.
Americans are used to like, I want everything all the time. So
Yeah.
there is some getting used to, hey, let's live with the ebb and flow of the season. And it's a positive thing, I think.
Well, you're living more off the land in a natural way versus I know here in the U.S. I know a lot of our produce comes from California, which sees the way the season works out in uh, the region where they grow everything. You can do it. You can do strawberries year round. You can do all that.
Yeah,
But again, I think there's a cost to all that for sure.
yeah.
So yeah,
That's
100%. Well, hey, I always try to end these things with the same general question, which, as a writer, I think you'd agree with me. Life is like a book. You have a first page, you have a last page. One of the blessings in life is you don't know how many pages are going to be in there, so it's kind of a mystery. But as a writer who is telling other people's stories, especially, but you get to tell your own story, what would you want to say for your last page?
Hmm. You mean at like the very end of my life,
Very, yeah, the very, and again, it's very kind of the way you take the question to be. But yeah, at the end, you get to write your last page. What does that last page say?
I like this. I mean, there's so much room for interpretation here, which makes it a wonderful question. So
No wrong
I
answer.
would I would say that last page, I want to be enveloped in peace, deep soul peace, and that comes with the satisfaction of knowing that as much as it was up to me and the opportunities that I was given, I left it out all out on the field.
Hmm.
I lived big, I traveled, I experienced, I laughed until my belly hurt, I ate good food. But more than anything, hopefully, I touched lives. I told stories that needed to be told that will far outlive me. And I will become dust someday and I'll go back to the earth. But I hope that the things that I invest in make a real difference, touch people's life, and there's a peace in having that satisfaction. So that's what I want my last page to be.
No, that's awesome. Well, I think what you're doing, especially like with what you did with Jeff, that's the one book that I've read. I think giving the voice to people that don't have that skill set, you're blessing people. Is the bottom line is you're blessing people by doing that. The person whose story you're telling, but also the people that get to read that story that has come from your interpretation of their life events. So that's a wonderful thing to do. And thank you for doing it.
I appreciate that. It means a lot.
Where can people go to find more about you and any projects you have coming up? And your project with Tyler is probably the next one that's going to drop. So where should
Yep.
everybody go?
Yep, pre-release on that, Forged in Chaos, so the links will all be up. At Lauren Ungeldi, LAURENUNGELDI. You can find me. Instagram is where I'm most active. I mean, you can hit me up on Facebook, but I'm not as active there. The best place to find me is on Instagram, and I'll do all my announcements. I mean, I've got my website up as well, laurenungeldi.com, but Instagram's best.
Thanks for coming on, Lauren. I appreciate it.
Appreciate you.